Hello and welcome to RWR Plays TEW 2020. This is WCW Lives On Chapter 29 in the series as we bring to you another episode of Nitro, another episode of Saturday Night, the latest TV taping WCW is holding in October of 2001. This is of course us playing as Eric Bischoff, as if Fusient Media Ventures, I should say, bought WCW in early 2001 instead of WWE, creating an alternative timeline where WCW continued to exist beyond the point at which it actually did in real life. Now, to start with, I will point you in the direction, as always, of our subscribe button. Please click the subscribe and follow us along so that you can continue to stay in touch with the series as it goes on. I should also plug the podcast that this YouTube channel was here to kind of promote, which was the Random Wrestling Review, which continues to run weekly with alternating episodes of our main show, which is where we look back at an event in history and review it, and then also a number of different alternative shows that we also put on, including Bracket Mania, The Game, RWR Now, and various other special bits and pieces. In terms of our archive, they're over now, I think, 175 episodes in the archive. You can find it in all the places that you find your podcast. Random Wrestling Review is the name of our podcast. And in the archive, we've got every single WrestleMania ever has been covered in detail and reviewed, as well as shows from WWE, WCW, ECW, TNA, AEW, NXT, and AWA, ranging from 1984 all the way through to 2024. So, a pretty full set of episodes. There's bound to be something that you enjoy if you take a listen. So yeah, have a look at the archive. Random Wrestling Review is the podcast. Now, on to today's episode, and first of all, recap, I guess, first of all, of last time, because in the main event of last week's Nitro, Booker T overcame Kevin Nash in the main event, but before the match, Nash was attacked by Diamond Dallas Page, who had run in from the crowd during Nash's entrance to the ring. Also, we saw Bill Goldberg indicate that he wanted to challenge Totally Buff for the tag team titles, a suggestion that Totally Buff laughed off until Eric Bischoff on Saturday night suggested Goldberg team with Jim Duggan, who he got 2 victories alongside during the Lethal Lottery, and then booked a match pitting Bill Goldberg and Jim Duggan against Kanyon and Bam Bam Bigelow on this week's Nitro, saying that if they could win 3 matches before Halloween Havoc, the tag title match would be on. Eric Bischoff also redid the raffle of opportunity that was introduced by Jeff Jarrett the previous week, and in doing so handed Konnan a WCW title shot versus Jeff Jarrett. And the full lineup for the Cruiserweight Grand Prix quarterfinal was decided, with Chavo, Guerrero Jr., James Maritato, AJ Styles and Air Parrish joining Rey Mysterio Jr., Billy Kidman, Shane Helms and Amazing Red in the last 8. And I should also mention at this point that we are about to go into the 13th anniversary of WCW celebrations with a special episode of Nitro, so that's why there is a world title match and various other big things have been announced for the show, including of course the first 2 quarterfinals in that Cruiserweight Grand Prix. So without further ado, let's get to WCW Monday Nitro for this week. Now, this week's TV taping comes from the UCSB Thunderdome in California. Don't know where that is in terms of where in California, and I don't know what that is. It might be, I guess, an arena connected to a university would be my guess, but I don't know. That's just a complete guess. That's where we're based anyway for this TV taping. And to start us off, we've got a dark match. It's Alexis Lurie and Angel Orsini against Ronnie Stevens and Jillian Hall in a decent tag team match here. Segment rating of 30. Angel Orsini had a 28, Alexis Lurie a 30, Ronnie Stevens a 24, and Jillian Hall a 17. So that's probably about the best match we've had, which has solely featured a women up to this point. Shame it was a dark match, but maybe that's also one of the reasons why it was given a better rating, simply because people weren't annoyed that it was on the main show when they don't really care about these wrestlers. So yeah, a really good start to the show. And we go into the TV taping proper. And it starts with Mike Tenay and Jerry Lawler sat at the commentary desk, and they welcome us to this special episode of Monday Nitro, as tonight the company celebrates its 13th anniversary. Jerry Lawler says that last week Jeff Jarrett was shocked when Eric Bischoff announced another raffle of opportunity, which resulted in a match tonight, which will see Jeff Jarrett take on Konnan for the WCW World title. Mike Tenay then says that also tonight the Cruiserweight Grand Prix will continue with Chavo Guerrero Jr. taking on Air Paris and Rey Mysterio Jr. taking on Amazing Red in 2 quarter-final matches. Lord of them reminds everyone that there will also be a 10-man battle royal between former US champions to determine the number 1 contender to the US title at Halloween Havoc. And then finally, Tenay says that there was big news announced midway through last week that would see tonight the Nature Boy Ric Flair become the first inductee to the new WCW Hall of Fame. Tenay asks, what better way is there to celebrate WCW's anniversary than to honour the career of its greatest ever competitor? So that was the big news being delivered here, that Nature Boy Ric Flair will be inducted into the WCW Hall of Fame tonight. I know there was actually a WCW Hall of Fame prior to this point, but I think like wrestling companies do from time to time, we're going to ignore that Hall of Fame even existed, simply because a lot of the people who were inducted into the Hall of Fame aren't on the game, and also I just didn't think it mattered too much. It was quite a few years before this, plus it was pre the years of success that WCW had, and I just felt like it would be nice to just start off with a clean slate. So this is as if there is no WCW Hall of Fame prior to this point, and this is a brand new endeavor. The first match of the night is between Bill Goldberg and Jim Duggan and Bam Bam Bigelow and Konnan in a tag team match, and Goldberg and Duggan get the victory, unsurprisingly, in 8 minutes and 55 seconds when Goldberg pins Bam Bam Bigelow. In terms of in-ring work, Bill Goldberg was, of course, head and shoulders above everyone else. Konnan and Bigelow were alright. Duggan's not particularly great, but an overall segment rating here of 63. As you can see, Jim Duggan was really off his game, but the performance of Bill Goldberg stood out. So we start with a big match, and Goldberg and Duggan get their first victory of 3 as they attempt to secure themselves a tag team title shot at Halloween Havoc. Then next, Tony Schiavone is stood in the ring and introduced his guest at this time, Kevin Nash. Schiavone says that everybody saw what happened last week on Nitro, and he asked Nash to what extent the attack by Diamond Dallas Page caused him to lose his match with Booker T. Nash replies that DDP couldn't hurt him because DDP isn't in his league, but he did break his concentration and focus, which is why Booker T was ultimately able to pull a rabbit out of the hat and beat him. Schiavone says that he must be angry about the loss against Booker T. Nash says he doesn't care about the loss, but the loss of earnings is a bigger issue, and when DDP messes with his money, they've got a real problem. Schiavone then asks if this means Nash will be looking to take revenge on DDP. Nash says that it's become clear to him over the past couple of months that WCW simply isn't big enough for both he and DDP anymore, and he's not willing to lose any more money because DDP can't leave things be between them. Schiavone asks Nash what he's saying. Nash then officially challenges DDP to a loser leaves WCW match at Halloween Havoc. He then says, "Happy birthday, WCW." So this was a really poor segment here, only a 44. Given the way Kevin Nash has been performing as of late, I expected more, but it wasn't to be. Segment rating of 44. I don't know what happened. All the green as well in the world down below, so I have no idea why this was so poor. But anyway, that's what happened, and we move on. The next match of the night is Rey Mysterio Jr. versus the Amazing Red in the first quarterfinal match in the Cruiserweight Grand Prix, and this got a really good segment rating of 65 despite Amazing Red's in-ring performance only hitting 29, but Rey Mysterio carried this to a very, very respectable level, and Rey Mysterio gets the win in 8 minutes and 18 seconds by pinfall to be the first person to progress to the semi-final of this tournament. Next, backstage, Sharmell Sullivan introduces Sean O'Haire for an interview backstage. She says that last week O'Haire had the chance to get his hands on Prodigy during a 6-man tag, but that Prodigy kept eluding him during the match. She then asks him how frustrating that must have been. O'Haire says it was very frustrating because there is only one thing he wants to do right now, and that is get his hands on Prodigy. Sullivan then asks whether O'Haire thinks that's going to happen anytime soon. O'Haire says that if it doesn't, he'll just have to make it happen. So segment rating here of 35. Again, a poor rating. I'm not really sure what's going on with these talking angles at the moment. And not really clear because, again, Sharmell Sullivan was pretty good during this. Maybe it was just down to Sean O'Haire's poor performance. I don't know. Next, there was a tag team match which saw Terry Funk and Tommy Dreamer team up against the American Mavericks, and this had a decent reaction from the crowd but subpar wrestling, and the American Mavericks got the surprise victory when James Storm pinned Terry Funk following botched interference by Tommy Dreamer. Tommy Dreamer was the best man in the match with a 61 rating, and what actually happened here was that towards the end of the match, Terry Funk and Tommy Dreamer got into a heated argument after the pair got in each other's way when the match breaks down. With both men distracted, their opponents recover and James Storm rolls Funk up from behind to get the roll-up victory. After the match, Dreamer and Funk both look annoyed with what happened. And yeah, segment rating here of 47, Dreamer 61, Funk a 43. Better ratings from Harris and Storm compared to their last match, but only still in the 30s at this point. So next up, we got Tony Schiavone conducting a backstage interview with Booker T. He says that after victory last week, Booker T stands just 3 weeks away from his chance to win back the WCW title at Halloween Havoc, and asks who he'd prefer to face, Jeff Jarrett or Konnan, who battle for the title tonight. Booker responds by saying that he'd prefer to win the title back from Jeff Jarrett because he feels like they have unfinished business, but if he has to face Konnan instead, so be it. He's a tough competitor too. Before the interview can continue, Mike Sanders interrupts and hands Booker a contract. Booker asks Sanders what this is. Sanders says it's a contract for a match with him on next week's show and says all he has to do is sign it and the match will be official. He then passes Booker a pen, but before Booker can sign, Tony Schiavone suggests that Booker think about the last contract he signed that was provided by Sanders and says he may want to have a lawyer look it over first. Booker reluctantly says he'll get it checked first, and Sanders walks off. So segment rating here of 61, everyone performed really well, so this gave me a bit more faith that the talking segments are fine, and for whatever reason those first two were just coincidentally both not particularly great. It's next time for the 10-man Battle Royal for a shot at the US title at Halloween Havoc. It featured Curt Hennig, Jester, Lance Storm, Lex Luger, Ric Flair, Rick Steiner, Scott Steiner, Shane Douglas and Sting, as well as a special guest entrant Barry Windham for this one. And Sting wins the Battle Royal in 15 minutes of 59 seconds when Lex Luger was last eliminated by Sting. During the match, we also saw some other shenanigans. So the final four are Steiner, Sting, Luger and Flair. After Steiner eliminated Curt Hennig. Hennig then helps Flair eliminate Steiner from the outside, and this leads to a wild brawl ensuing between the pair. Officials then attempt to separate them, during which time Lex Luger is thrown out by Sting, but the refs don't see it, and he sneaks back in the ring and throws Ric Flair out, just as it looks like we're going to have a Sting-Flair final two. Sting then eventually manages to get the win when he ducks under a charging Luger and back body drops him out. So a segment rating here of 80. Barry Windham started really well. Scott Steiner's gimmick's getting a little bit stale, which is a shame, and obviously a few of our stories continued in this one, but a really amazing segment rating of 80, which is a shame we didn't put it in the main event, but it just didn't quite fit what I was trying to do with this episode. After the match, and now in the aisle, Curt Hennig and Scott Steiner break free from the officials, leading them away, and their brawl starts up again as officials try to part them, and the show goes to a break. And this was a really hot segment, as has been the case effectively for Steiner and Curt Hennig all the way through this feud so far. Segment rating of 86. Steiner looked good. Hennig was actually underwhelming, so the angle could have been even better potentially. So the next match is another in the Cruiserweight Grand Prix quarterfinals, and this one sees Chavo Guerrero Jr. overcome Air Paris in 7 minutes and 32 seconds by pinfall while using the ropes for leverage. So segment rating of 44, Chavo Guerrero Jr. 58, Air Paris of 42. Not too bad, but the crowd were turned off by having a match outside of the pre-show between workers they don't have any investment in. And I think that's a shame that that's where Chavo Guerrero Jr. is at the moment, but I guess I haven't particularly booked him that well. So anyway, that's the match. Chavo Guerrero Jr. is the second man through to the semi-final of the Cruiserweight Grand Prix. Incidentally, Chavo and Rey Mysterio Jr. will not face each other in the semi-final. Their opponents will be determined in the other two quarterfinals that are set to take place on next week's episode of Nitro. So next, Sharmell Sullivan speaks to Eric Bischoff and asks him how he feels tonight's WCW 13th anniversary has gone. Bischoff says he couldn't be happier with the show and the action that's taking place tonight, and he's very much looking forward to the double main event coming up. Jeff Jarrett defending the WCW title versus Konnan, and Ric Flair being inducted into the WCW Hall of Fame. Sharmell then asked Bischoff how he intends to follow this up next week. Bischoff says that we have the other 2 quarterfinals in the Cruiserweight Grand Prix, and he's just been informed by Booker T that he will be fighting Mike Sanders next week, having signed the contract for the bout. He also says that next week a former WCW Cruiserweight Champion will be returning to the promotion and will be facing Great Sasuke in a special Cruiserweight title match. So this segment was really just put here to get a few of the matches and a few of the things that are happening next week's show announced and out there in front of the cameras. It got a segment rating of 56. Everyone performed pretty well. Happy with that. So the main event match of the night was between Jeff Jarrett and Konnan for the WCW World title, and saw Jeff Jarrett retain his title in 17 minutes and 6 seconds. How this one played out was at about the 15-minute mark. Konnan managed to lock in the Tequila Sunrise to potentially win the title, but Mike Sanders got up on the apron and distracted the referee. Konnan then released the hold to go after Sanders, but Jarrett recovered and attacked Konnan from behind. With the ref still trying to get Sanders off the apron, Konnan hits Jarrett with a 187 DDT. This time, however, John Cena gets in the ring and picks up Konnan to hit a fireman's carry slam, effectively an FU. He then puts Jarrett on top of Konnan, and Sanders drops down from the apron, allowing the referee to count the 3 and allow Jarrett to retain. So as I said, segment rating here of 69, Jeff Jarrett an in-ring performance of 74, Konnan in 63. Not a bad title match given that Konnan was not really a main event player, and a segment rating of 69 is fine for what we're trying to accomplish with each of our episodes of Nitro and the main event of them. And then it was time for Ric Flair's induction into the WCW Hall of Fame, and it starts with Tony Schiavone introducing Ric Flair by bringing out the man that will induct him, Arn Anderson. Anderson made a speech talking about how Flair is the greatest wrestler in the history of the business and that there is no better way to start a new Hall of Fame than inducting the Nature Boy. Ric Flair is then introduced and he says thank you from the bottom of his heart to the fans, and then lists off a bunch of people who helped him or who he worked with, including Arn Anderson, Harley Race, Ricky Steamboat, Terry Funk, Sting and others. Before he can finish his speech, however, Shane Douglas interrupts and Chronic stand at the apron to prevent anybody from preventing Douglas from interrupting. Douglas says that this is a sham, that WCW want you to think that Flair is this kindly old man who always did the best by them. Douglas says that these people have short memories, that just 6 months ago Ric Flair was trying to destroy WCW from the inside out with the Magnificent Seven. He says that Flair didn't deserve any of his title victories because he got them all on the back of using the Four Horsemen and doing his best to keep young talent down. Douglas says that Flair is a selfish old piece of crap that has succeeded on the backs of other people's works and other people's achievements. And the person who he took from most was this sorry sack of you-know-what, Arn Anderson, and he points towards AA. Douglas tells Anderson that he spent his entire career helping Flair win matches, accepting second position to Flair, picking from Flair's cast-offs with the women, doing what he was told, and what did he get out of it? Nothing, except standing there, once more bowing down to his best buddy like the old cripple he really is. With that, Flair charges Douglas down as others tries to prevent a fight. Douglas manages to escape the melee and get out of the ring, laughing as he goes, with a raging Ric Flair in the ring wanting to get at Douglas, being held back by Schiavone and Anderson as Nitro goes off the air. So a really good segment rating here of 75. Douglas and Flair have been involved in a really good feud to this point, and all of them performed well. Douglas, even Schiavone, Flair and Arn Anderson all performed really, really well. A really strong way to end the show, with Flair being inducted into the Hall of Fame, but Douglas effectively ruining it by calling Arn Anderson a sorry piece of you-know-what and basically calling him a cripple and trying to really kind of say some nasty things to get under the skin of Ric Flair more than anybody else. So that's the end of Nitro for this week, and again it's increased our popularity everywhere, which is exactly what we need. An overall rating of 73, a decent match between Jeff Jarrett and Konnan, another one which was decent between Rey Mysterio Jr. and Amazing Red, and obviously the opening tag team match, which is pretty good as well. Happy with that show, although obviously the best match of the night was the Battle Royal, which got a segment rating of 80 and becomes, I think, a top 5 match in WCW since its relaunch. So we're going to now bring you WCW Saturday Night. So this TV taping in the end took place before 3,716 people, which I think is a new record for WCW since the relaunch in terms of its TV taping tendencies, so that's a real positive. And the episode here of Saturday Night starts with a really great angle where basically footage is introduced of the scene backstage after the end of Monday Nitro and sees a cameraman approach Sting to get his reaction to what took place. Sting says that what Shane Douglas did tonight was wrong. This was supposed to be a special night for Flair and for WCW, and Douglas completely ruined it. So segment rating of 82, and Sting was excellent as he kind of gave his thoughts on Douglas's antics at the end of Nitro. Then in the first match of the night, Booker T faced Mike Knox in a little bit of just an exhibition match. We saw Booker T get a victory in 5 minutes 44 seconds, a segment rating of 62. Mike Knox had an in-ring performance of 31, and I'm wondering whether or not I should use him a little bit more, or at least start to use him a little bit, because he's been pretty decent in terms of the performance he's put forward. Booker T was excellent, though, as you might imagine, and got the victory here pretty easily. Then we had a backstage interview where Sharmell Sullivan caught up with Vampiro. Sullivan asks Vampiro why he requested some interview time on tonight's show. Vampiro says that he heard what Sean O'Haire had to say for himself on Nitro, and says that the Gothic Collective have discussed it and decided that O'Haire can face him instead of Prodigy. Sullivan asks whether this has been made official, and Vampiro says that he has spoken to Eric Bischoff and the match is on so long as Sean O'Haire turns up for it. So a segment rating of 57 as Vampiro makes it clear that he will be facing Sean O'Haire on Nitro next week. Next, in the latest women's title round robin match, Cara Slice and Jazz draw after 7 minutes and 5 seconds and a double countout. Going into this one, Jazz had a 4-0 record while Slice had a 1-3 record, and the match ended up going to a double countout when it spilled to the outside and Jazz attempted to get back in the ring, but Cara Slice grabbed hold of her foot and wouldn't let her go, to ensure that she manufactured the count-out draw, and meaning that Jazz's 100% record has indeed come to an end, as Cara Slice promised on the previous week's episode of Saturday Night. So Cara Slice had a 22 here, Jazz at a 26. Still, the fans not that invested in these two, but they are both improving, and that's a positive. Next up, we have Sharmell Sullivan interviewing Terry Funk and asking him about his and Dreamer's loss on Nitro. Funk says that he doesn't want to talk about that right now, but says that it's clear that he and Dreamer have got some issues to resolve, and challenges Dreamer to step in the ring with him one-on-one. So a segment rating here of 40, and Terry Funk pretty decent. Sharmell Sullivan was improvising well as well. I think Sullivan's doing all right as the sort of B-level interviewer. Then a tag team match between Chaos Theory and 3 Count, and in a match that had subpar wrestling and little heat, Chaos Theory defeated 3 Count in 10 minutes and 1 second when Tajiri submitted Courageous. Segment rating here of 36, Tajiri of 42, Whipwreck of 44, Evan Courageous of 47. Nobody in this match that the fans are that invested in, but all the same, not a great rating of 36 given the individual ratings of the wrestlers involved. And so apologies, but at that point, for whatever reason, the recording that I was doing stopped. I don't know why, and I didn't realise, and I continued on, played out the rest of the show, and therefore I didn't capture it, I don't have it for you. So I'm just going to recap what happened. Actually, we're quite lucky, we nearly got to the end of the taping here, with Konnan first of all saying that he was disappointed not to be WCW champion in an interview that was recorded during Nitro but aired for the first time here on Saturday night, as Konnan spoke to Tony Schiavone, and he says that he's going to go away for the next week or so, concentrate on watching his buddies in the Cruiserweight Grand Prix, and then decide what to do next. And then in the main event, Mike Awesome defeated Ernest Miller in a non-title match that went about 8.5 minutes. And was won by Mike Awesome, as you might imagine. A rating of 61 for an overall show rating of 63, which is pretty good for a WCW Saturday night. And then in addition to that, what we got afterwards was a little bit of look of Raw and of some news. So first of all, Raw itself, the show had a show rating of 91. It was headlined by Benoit and Jericho against Dangerous by Design, which, as we've said before, is Raven and William Regal. They also had The Rock versus David Flair, Kurt Angle against Christopher Daniels, and the Ultimate Warrior versus Haku. And I can't help but feel that there's a strange mix in WWE at this point in time where they have some really great wrestling allied to some really bizarrely kind of mad matches like The Rock versus David Flair, which I don't think would have ever happened in real life. But there you go. That's what's going on in WWF at the moment. Now, the big news for me was that this particular news item. So in a story broken by our friends over at blurcat.com, Sean O'Haire will be competing in MMA. The 30-year-old has accepted an offer to fight in a few months and is believed to be starting his camp in just 8 weeks or so. While training for the fight, he will not be doing anything connected to wrestling in order to maintain his focus. So I was talking about this because there's also another Sean O'Haire news story. Again, I recorded all this once before, but it didn't record for whatever reason. It says here, reports indicate that WCW management are very keen to make Sean O'Haire the focal point of the promotion, and their belief is that he is ideal to build the company around, as he is on the verge of being a massive breakout star, and his popularity will mean big business for them. So what I was saying here is ultimately, like, first of all, I would clarify, I wasn't looking to make Sean O'Haire the focal point of the promotion, but certainly we were looking to give him a renewed push. That was one of the reasons why we split him and Prodigy up as a tag team. We wanted to get Sean O'Haire free so we could start to move him forward. And he's now accepted an MMA fight, which I believe we've got him for 8 weeks, and then he'll go off for a number of months and train for that, and then he'll have his match. So I could be without him for about 3, 4, 6 months for all I know. And so actually, you know, the idea about pushing him might have to be put on hold. And, you know, in general, having someone who's going to potentially go for MMA fights is not a good thing at all, because you just can never guarantee that they're going to be around for any period of time. So yeah, a bit of a difficult one for this, and it means I've got to go away and start probably changing and shuffling about some of the plans I had for him over the next couple of months. First of all, to explain his absence, but then also to kind of maybe make a bit of a difference in terms of where he would have ended up at the conclusion of those 2 months, because, as I say, he was in line for a bit of a push, and he's in the midst of the feud with the Gothic Collective at the moment. So that is this episode. Apologies for the strange way that the episode had to end. I don't know what happened there, that just the recording stopped and I didn't notice it, and therefore we were left without the end of the episode as it should have been. But nevertheless, hope you've enjoyed it. If you have done so, please give us a like and subscribe to continue to follow along with what we're doing. We'll be back next time with another episode of Nitro, another episode of WCW Saturday Night, as we close in on Halloween Havoc. But until next time, thank you very much for watching.